It was the final round of the European Club Cup today, and also the final game of Magnus Carlsen before the World Championship match starting in London on November the 9th. So in this final game, Carlsen was facing a very strong opponent, Peter Svidler, 8-time Russian champion. But Peter wasn't having a great event. He only had 1 point out of 5. Carlsen with black pieces. Well, never easy trying to shake things up, but it's interesting. I think that Carlsen was basically wanted to sort of dig in. He wanted to play World Championship style chess, and he played a solid Carlsen. And the well, let me just take you through those opening moves. Solid Carlsen, and not even with Bishop f5, but he played this slightly unusual variation with e takes f6. Now this is very solid, but if White is content to also play solidly, very hard to generate winning chances. And indeed, well, Svidler played it very well. I don't want to go through the whole game, if you don't mind. It wasn't that interesting. Basically, Svidler maintained his slight advantage, and you can see they've come into this endgame with a bishop against the knight, and White has a slight space advantage. He's been able to advance his king up the board to gain more territory, and he has an overlap on the queen side. So White is definitely better here. So Carlsen has a difficult defence ahead of him, but maybe he was thinking that this is just the kind of endgame that it's possible he'll have to defend in a World Championship match. Who knows? I just somehow don't think we'll be seeing the e takes f6 variation of the Carlsen in the World Championship match, but that could be famous last words from me. Anyway, this position, what does Black do? The problem in this position is that Black is liable to be squeezed here. Could find himself in Zugzwang. If there are pawn weaknesses on this side of the board, then it could well be possible to push Black's king out of the way and then enter this side of the board with the king. So this is the danger. So Black has to be very careful about which pawn moves to make. It has to try and keep a solid front. Carlsen plays a very interesting move here, knight g8. He obviously realises that this knight is actually not on a stable square on f6, and he wants to redeploy it to e7. Now from e7 it will cover some really important squares and could well prevent White's king from entering the position. Why do I say f6 isn't stable? Well, it's liable to be hit by g4, g5. Of course, c5 will drive the king back. And yeah, in some cases f7 could be attacked, and there could be then a weakness and White's king could dive in. This is the problem. And if g4 is blocked by g5, then again, once the Black's king is driven back, then that g-pawn could be vulnerable. So Black has to be really careful here. And knight g8 is a really tricky move. Okay, let's see what happens. So c5, driving the king back. This looks pretty normal. And then you can see there are no weaknesses in Black's pawn front here, so White's king can't gain entry. However, bishop d5 is obviously a critical move. Well, pawn can't advance because the knight will be hit. So Carlsen had planned knight e7. Now, if the bishop comes back, then it's hard for White to get anywhere in this position because of this strong pawn front. Critical move, of course, is bishop takes pawn, but then knight f5 check. Now, this involved some serious calculation. And here, actually, Black is fine. I mean, one possible idea is to create a passed pawn, so therefore h5 fixes those pawns. So let me show you one typical variation of what could occur. So the king comes up. Well, if the king steps back, then the knight can just hassle the king, so there's no point in that. So white's only chance is to gain entry into those pawns. Now this is an interesting moment. Black's king actually can come back, and after king takes pawn, king f6. So this traps the king on the h-file, and actually this is a drawn position. It's really hard for white to get anywhere at all here. Let me give you one possible variation. If the king steps up to try and make room for the pawn, or possibly come around here, then the king comes in, and now the knight blockades, preventing the pawn advancing. And again, it's actually impossible for white to make progress here. White's king could travel to the other side of the board, but then if that happens, then black's knight will come over, and all it needs to do is exchange itself off for that pawn. And, well, even if you didn't take this pawn, the king could just come back, and that's a theoretical draw because it's a bishop of the wrong colour. I mean, of course, there are other ways to play that, but that's roughly what would happen. Basically, bishop takes pawn would simplify too much. The knight would come out and take this pawn. So Svidler played king e5. Now bishop takes pawn is a threat, you could say, because knight f5 has been prevented. But it allows the bishop to be exchanged. Now, at first glance, you'd think, well, with white's king so far up the board, this must be winning for white. But Carlsen has calculated extremely well. Still very possible to go wrong here. But, well, for example, if a6, that's a very, very careless move, then white gains space on this side of the board. Let's give a check. And let's advance again. And now black is running very short of moves. If the king goes backwards, then you can see the king is going to come in and just take these pawns. If g6, try to create a passed pawn, then an old trick, we've seen this in a few games. g5, very nice, and if pawn takes, then this pawn goes through. And if g5, then white's king comes over and basically takes these pawns. Oops, not that one. Takes the f pawn, takes the h pawn, and then white's passed h pawn goes through. So, I mean, a6 a very careless move. Very important move from Carlsen, h5, and with this move he keeps things under control. So let's see. c6. So if black's king drops back, there's still a chance for the king to come in here, but Carlsen waits. So now you can see these pawns are matched. a4, a5. And now you can see just for one moment there's no way through for white's king, so king e5 would have no effect. We simply take this pawn. So king c5. And now there's time to play f6. King isn't coming into e6, not yet. And then black is able to simplify. I mean, there's really nothing better for white now than to head for these pawns. And black exchanges. And here, if black's king goes for the a pawn, then white's pawn is going to get there first. If you want convincing of that, well, okay, let me just show you very quickly. You'll find that white's pawn gets to h7, and excuse me, it queens gets to h8 and prevents black's pawn from queening. And this is not a draw because the king is in the wrong position, and then on the next turn the queen comes there, and that's a win. But here, instead of going for this pawn, black's king just follows white's king over. and this is a draw. The important thing is to keep white's king trapped at the edge of the board for as long as possible. And here, well, king h7 doesn't change the position at all. Svidler came out. Now, crucial thing is that Carlsen had to have calculated this variation. What happens if white's king heads over to the other side of the board? Well, black's king gets there just in time. Here we go, and got there. The key square, and that's a draw. So Svidler played a check and didn't bother making any progress. He just went for the draw there. So, solid, tough defence from the world champion. And that draw ensures that he maintains his #1 spot on the live rating list. So he's now rated 2834.7 and Caruana is 2832.3. So Carlsen still has a lead of 2.4 points going into the World Championship match. I'm sure Magnus is very pleased about that, but it just means in London they play for all the marbles. So how was Carlsen's form in this event? Well, I think he'll be disappointed with some of his games, but a positive is that he got some minutes on the board, so he got some practice in, and showed some real resilience in some of the games. I mean, his game against Ding, that was very tough. Probably should have lost that, but still. He dug in and found a good defence. So anyway, I think Magnus will just be relieved to get it out of the way, to have played some proper chess, and now he can return to his preparations for the match. And looking at his openings, I don't think we saw too much that he didn't give too much away. That's what I'm trying to say. Right, well, my next appearance on video will be from the Isle of Man Open tournament. This is a fantastically strong tournament, so do check that out. Isle of Man Chess. Well, just Google it. Isle of Man Chess tournament, and you'll see what an extraordinary lineup of players that are participating. I'm going to be commentating there, and I'm going to be doing video reports afterwards as well. So do check out that tournament. It really is fantastically strong. And if you're not a subscriber, then click on the button there. You can check out lots of playlists in the video description. Again, it's all up there. And if you want to join the inner circle, then do consider visiting patreon.com, PowerPlayChess, and supporting us a little bit financially. Check out the rewards for what you get each month. Newsletters, videos, well, you'll see the rewards there. And if you want to just make a one-off donation on PayPal, there's a button up there somewhere as well. You can click on that. Thanks very much for watching.